actually used one of these before, so everybody hear it? Well, I'm Lesley, for anyone who doesn't know me, and this is my brother Ian. And we sort of got into Marc Bolan about the same time. Round about, well, it all started in 1970 with Ride a White Swan. And we couldn't afford to buy a record at the time, so our cousin had Ride a White Swan. And we spent a lot of time round at our cousin's listening to Ride a White Swan. And we played it, and the B-side, and then played Ride a White Swan again, flipping it over. And we just sort of got hooked. And then Hot Love came out. And that was the first single that Ian bought.
Well, I would just like to say a bit about Ride a White Swan when we was round. It was my mum's cousin and her daughters had this record, and we heard it, and the B-side, Is It Love, Summertime Blues, and we didn't know who it was by. You know, well, obviously it was T.rex, but we'd never seen him, where he was from, you know, what he looked like, or anything like that. And something that, I mean, I was 10 years old, Lesley was 12, and it was just an amazing moment that just hit us both at that same time. And then, like, Lesley just moved on to Hot Love before, and that was the first record I ever bought by Marc or by anybody. And that was always closest to my heart. I mean, it's just an absolute fabulous record. And then I'll put you back onto Lesley, because when, I've got to say this, when Lesley saw Marc in a magazine or something like that, or it might have been on Top of the Pops, well then things did start to change. I think she fancied him.
Well,
but I didn't, but he was a lot better looking than the girls in my class.
like Ian said, the first thing we heard was Ride a White Swan, and it was just the music and Marc's voice that was just so catchy and so different. And then we heard Hot Love and thought, oh, who is this T.rex, who is this Marc Bolan? And then, like Ian said, we saw him on Top of the Pops.
And can I just, sorry. What I was going to say there was, we didn't come from a really poor family, but we only had black and white TV. It wasn't colour. So we saw Marc in black and white on Top of the Pops, and I'll never forget it. The bit, you know, where he does the ow. That just, it came out on the telly. Because at the time I was, and still am, into Manchester United, and I was in love with George Best, because the best football I'd ever seen at the time. And then this guy Marc Bolan came along with long hair, and I thought,
and you didn't fancy him?
no,
you were in love with George Best.
No, it's football.
You deep in a hole for yourself. So the bonus was, he looked good as well. You know, not only was the music good, but he looked so different than anything, well, different than the boys at school. You know, the long hair, the glitter on his face, and I've always liked people that are a little bit different and, you know, like to do their own thing. So I got hooked at that stage, and at that time Hot Love was out, and it was #1 for 6 weeks, and I thought, I've got to see this band, I've got to see T.rex. And I was having a conversation with my mum at the time, and she told me about some pop star in her day that she used to like, and I can't remember the name of him now. My mum's since died, so I'll never know that now. She died the same year as Marc, actually, so 1977 was not a good year for me and Ian. Anyway, she said, oh, don't build your hopes up, because this guy, whoever it was that she'd seen, he was a total letdown when she actually saw him live. So the first time I saw Marc, and Ian's never forgiven me for this, because I never told him that I was going, because he was 10, he was into George Best and Man United, so I went.
She said, I'm just going for a sleepover. No, I'm not going to see Marc Bolan on the 50p tour. Lesley.
So I went, and Marc came on stage, and well, it was just fantastic, and I just thought he was everything I ever thought and more. So I was hooked then, and I wanted to go again and again. And so that was in the May, and then I saw him again in the November, and that was 71. And then 72, I actually went to Wembley. The first, well, the 8:30 show was sold out, and they put another show on, and I managed to get a ticket for that, which was a fantastic experience. But I was towards the back, so I just wanted to get a bit closer. And then in June that year, we got tickets. I went to queue up for tickets in May when Metal Guru was #1, and 4 weeks later, when the concert actually took place, Metal Guru was still #1. And I remember queuing for tickets at the time, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning, and they put Metal Guru on the radio, and all down the line of people queuing up, all the transistor radios turned up, and we were all singing along to Metal Guru. And then after that, I saw him in Edmonton and Brixton 3 times that year in December, and then again in 1974 at the Free Trade Hall. And that's, to my regret, that was the last time I saw Marc, because after that I got married, I had a baby. That's the time when people tell you, oh, that's it now, that's a bit of an infatuation and it's all over. And that was when Marc was going through his probably not so popular phase. So the next thing, I used to hear his records on the radio and think, yeah, they're okay, but I don't think I was ready for the change then. And then in 76 he was on Supersonic, and my mum was going to turn it off. She said, oh, we don't want to watch this, and I just said, no, leave it on. And she turned to me and said, I thought you'd grown out of all that. And I said, so did I. And at that point I realised that I was never going to grow out of it, and it was there for life. So from that point I thought, I want to see him again, and I saw the Marc shows. And then in August 77, when Elvis Presley died and it was on the news, I thought, God, how would I feel if that was Marc Bolan, you know? And then exactly a month later it happened, and it was just devastating. So he's been such an important part of our life growing up. When we were saying we couldn't afford a record, and we left Hot Love on the windowsill, and it warped, and we actually put it between 2 towels and ironed it, just because we still wanted to play it. We put a 2p on the head of the record, you know, the needle, just to stop it going around like that. And Electric Warrior, we borrowed off somebody, a friend who was a bit older than us and had a bit more money, and we played that over and over.
It's not as good as a slider though.
we always argue over which is the best album. But yeah, Marc was special. I mean, nobody like him. And somebody once said about him, if he walked into a room, even if you didn't know who he was, you'd know he was somebody. And that's so right. He was so special and so much a part of our lives. And for the family, it's great. It's such a privilege for us that we can share this day with them and hear stories from his family and his friends. And we gain something from that, and I hope it works both ways, and you can appreciate from us how special he was in our lives as well.
Well, I'd just like to say a few things. If I can get a word in edgeways.
I'm the big sister.
Yeah, no, she always bosses me about.
That's my job.
To look after me. No, what I was going to say, I said, well, no more jokes, Caroline. Was I making a joke?
No, darling, you're doing fine.
Yeah, I'd say Marc Bolan is still the best looking man I've ever seen.
Yeah,
anyway.
I agree.
And I'm 50 years old, so I've seen lots of girls. Don't mean I've been to bed with him. One thing I would like to say is something that always. I know Marc over there, Marc Hartley. It says it's Marc's lyrics that get me all the time, and his voice. And Marc out over there is probably one of the closest sounding like Marc. Because over the years I've been to see loads of tribute bands, and like you've got you know the T.rex, your T.rexes, and they get the music sort of more or less right, but it's that voice and it just don't quite hit it. So, but and like just going back to the lyrics here, I mean there's loads of great lyrics, but one of my favourites is like the first record I ever bought, Hot Love, and the B-side, Woodland Rock. And that line, every time I put it on, it's met a little mama, she was sweet, she was gone, she's got legs like a railroad, face like a song. I'm like, where did that come from? I couldn't write that down. And you look at his lyrics, like in the albums, or you get the lyric books or something, and you think, what are you going on about there, Marc? When it's put to music, it just explodes in front of you. And I always prefer to listen. I mean, I like watching the DVDs, but I always prefer to listen to Marc. I mean, I've got a vast collection of Marc and other artists, but I'll just play them, but I always listen to Marc, and I take in what he's saying to me. And it just takes me, I mean, because everyone gets down, don't they, now and again, and I just put him on, he just does it. A couple of beers in Poland, great. Maybe sometimes more than a couple. I'm just, because
You want food now?
Yeah.
I know.
You're boring me now.
I was going to say, but because I had prepared something, but like it went a bit.
Next year.
Yeah, but I'll try and get it organised for next year, but it went a bit tits up.
Well, if you can say yes, you can say tits.
Yeah, because that's that word, so I can get away with tits. And if that was you,
We should be on telly.
Today is the day we remember the genius Marc Bolan.